I'm Jackie Marks, and today we're making a car seat poncho. If you don't know what a car seat poncho is, it's a garment that you put on your child before they leave the house, and then when they get to the car seat, you can buckle them in entirely underneath the poncho so that the buckles are not over top of the child's outerwear. Because as you may know, that can be dangerous. It can hinder the effectiveness of the car seat. And we want to keep those kids super safe. So we want to buckle them underneath something that will still keep them warm. Now, I am not a medical professional or a car seat safety expert, so you want to talk to those professionals in your neighborhood and not take my advice at all. Since the car seat poncho is largely made of just a circle, it's basically a circle skirt if you've ever made one of those, and then an attached hood, we need to talk about circle math, my favorite. So you need a couple measurements. You want the arm length or the wingspan basically of the child. I had his mom measure shoulder to wrist, and she said that was 11 inches. And then head circumference was 18 inches. But I need to know the diameter. If that's a circle, I need to know the diameter this way. And to get circumference to diameter, all we need to do is divide by pi, which is 3.14. But because 18 and 3 are such nice numbers, we just went ahead and did 18 divided by 3, which gives us 6 inches. So the total size of my poncho needed to be 11 plus 11 plus 6, which is 28 inches. So I need a 28-inch circle. I happen to have a piece of fabric that is 27 inches, which is 3/4 of a yard. So I decided I would just make a 27-inch circle instead. Now, whatever number you get here, you just need to make sure your fabric is wider than that. Because I'm using 45-inch wide fabric, it worked out great for me. I had plenty of fabric. If your wingspan is more than 45 inches, you need to use a wider fabric or piece it together like patchwork before you quilt it. The first thing we need to do is quilt the panel that we'll be cutting all of our pieces out of. I'm using wool for the front, a flannel on the back, that'll be the inside of the poncho, and then a cotton batting. So my fiber content is all over the place, but it's gonna be great. I'm just gonna free motion a very simple meander just to hold all 3 layers together. Now I just need to trim away the excess batting and backing. What we need to do here is cut out a circle that's 27 inches in diameter, because that's how much fabric I have to work with here is 27 inches. Now you could leave it square and just cut a hole out of the middle, which we are also going to do, but because I'm finishing it with bias tape, I think it'll look nicer if it has a rounded edge. So I've marked my center here, and since half of 27 is 13.5, I just need to measure out from the center 13.5 inches and make a mark. And then I'll angle it slightly, keeping my 0 here at the center, and make another mark. And I'll keep doing that until I have sort of a circular shape that I can follow. once you have a bunch of little dots that are all 13.5 inches out from your center, you can kind of connect them with your marking tool to give yourself a circular line to cut, or you can just go for it and start cutting. So here I have my 27-inch circle. I need a head hole. I need a place to attach the hood. And since, as we talked about earlier, we have an 18-inch head circumference, that means we have roughly a 6-inch diameter, which gives us a 3-inch radius. So from this same center point, we're gonna measure a 3-inch circle. And then you'll cut that out the same way you did this one. So now you have a circle like this that looks like a donut. You have your outside circle and your inside circle. Now we need to cut out 2 pieces for the hood of the car seat poncho. So what you're gonna do is find a hood that fits the child, or if you've made clothes for this kid in the past, you might have floating around a little paper pattern piece that you can use. I'm just gonna lay this out nice and flat. And trace, adding seam allowance around the outside, but not adding seam allowance here because we're just gonna finish that up with binding. I'm using a Sharpie so you can see my lines, but you'll want to use something that will either wash out or wipe out or disappear with heat or something like that. Okay, then I need to kind of fold this up. Okay, and then I have one hood piece traced and ready to go. Now, because of the measurements and the math we did earlier, I know I want this line here to be as close to 9 inches as I can get it, because that's going to be half of my head circumference when it opens up on the finished garment. So I'm going to measure this and see if I need to make any adjustments. Looks like we're at about 7.5, so I'm just going to jog that out, about a 1/2 inch there. Kind of grade this out. About a 1/2 inch there, which should put me closer to 8, and I can work with that. Okay, that's gonna be close enough. And then once you cut that first piece out, you want to flip it over like this to cut it out again so that you have 2 mirror image pieces. You don't want to cut the same hood piece twice in the same orientation. You need a mirror image. Okay, now we'll just take those 2 hood pieces, put them right sides together, and sew along this curved edge. Just like that. And the only thing I'm gonna do to finish the seam is press it open and top stitch both sides of the seam allowance down, but you can finish the seam however you would prefer to. Now we just need to attach the hood to the poncho. I'm just gonna start pinning in the center here. We have the right sides together. You might need to use clips if yours is as thick as mine. And then I'm just gonna work my way around the circle with the hood. Now on my poncho, I'm gonna leave that gap here. It's gonna be fine. I'm gonna finish it with bias tape, and we're gonna cut a little notch here to make sure we can get it on and off over the baby's head. But if you live in a colder place and you wanna make sure you have that full coverage, you might wanna make that hood a little bigger to come all the way into the center. And if you have an older kid, you might not have to worry so much about ease of getting it on and off. So then we'll just need to take this to the machine and sew the hood onto the poncho. Now it's time for the bias binding. This is a great place to use store-bought binding. You'll probably need 2 packages. I measured my garment here. I'm gonna need just over 3 yards, and I'm gonna be making my own. So I'm ready to start sewing my bias tape onto my poncho. This is the wrong side of the poncho. I'm sewing it to the wrong side first. And I have a little tail back here that I'm gonna leave unsewn for now. So I have my walking foot. Oh, let's get my feed dogs up. And because this strip is cut on the bias, it will curve really nicely around the curve of the poncho. Once I get back around to where I started here, I need to leave myself a little gap, and I'll cut the thread. And then because my bias binding is 2.5 inches wide, I need to overlap it by 2.5 inches right now so that I can sew it together on the diagonal. I'm just gonna cut a little bit off here. Still need to have some space to maneuver. And then I want this amount of overlap to be 2.5 inches. Okay, so I'll cut that right there. Now I want to put these right sides together and just twist. And then sew from this corner to that corner. And this takes a little bit of maneuvering. You can use some pins if you want. I'm just gonna start in one corner. Get that needle down in the fabric, holding it in place, and then I can maneuver the rest of my seam here. See when that opens up, after I trim that excess off, I'll have a really nice join right there. and then we'll just take it back to the needle and finish sewing that on. Now we want to wrap it around to the right side of the garment. And your goal here is just to cover that line of stitching. So you can use wonder clips to hold this in place all the way around. And then all we're gonna do is stitch it down really close to the edge, just a nice little edge stitch to give you a really nice finish around the bottom of your poncho. Just like that. So you have a nice finish all the way around the outside of your poncho. And now we need to do something very similar for this edge along the front of the hood. Okay, so now I'm gonna start sewing onto the side of the hood. And when I get to a corner like this, we have a couple of inside corners that we're working with. We're gonna just straighten it out and pretend it's not there. And we're gonna make it look like a corner later. So just manipulate the fabric to be able to sew in a straight line. Now on this outside corner, we're gonna miter it just like we would do on the outside corner of a quilt. I'm gonna pivot, sew off the edge, and cut. Then fold up at a 45. Fold the binding back down on itself. And start sewing again. And then here we have another inside corner. So we're gonna do the same thing and manipulate it so that you can sew it in a straight line. Just open that up, and it's a little bulky, so it might take some doing, but you can see you can kind of sew it in a straight line like that. Make sure you're catching all your layers in that process. Okay, so when we go to wrap this around to the front, we're gonna do the same thing and manipulate the fabric into a straight line. And sew it as though it were a straight line. Okay, it already looks pretty good. I don't think I need to put a dart in this curve right here. I'm happy with that, but I'm gonna show you how to put a dart here so we don't get this funky little bubbly thing going on. And then if you wanted to do that in this inside corner of your garment, you could do that as well. So what we're gonna do here to get a nice point is we're gonna turn it inside out, fold this right sides together, and we want this to be a straight line. So right where this piece is poking out, we're gonna sew here and make sort of a dart, and then we'll have a nice angle on the front there. So if you can just visualize a straight line, that's where we're gonna be sewing. Let's start from this way. think my machine will handle that a little bit better. I'm gonna back stitch. Cut the thread. Okay, and then you have your nice little V right there in the front. And I might rip some of that out so I have more of the opening left. But there you go. How cute is that?